Good evening and welcome to the January 16th, 2024 meeting of the DEIJ Subcommittee of the Brookline School Committee. First on our agenda is an approval of the minutes from November 20th, 2023 of the joint meeting of DEIJ and policy. Has everybody had a chance to review them? Okay. Is there a motion?
I'll move them.
I'll second.
Mariah seconds. Stephen, your vote?
Yes.
Mariah?
Yes.
Natalia?
Yes.
And I also vote yes. Public comment, we don't usually do at this committee, but given interest in public comment for this meeting, we are accepting public comment. We have 9 people signed up for public comment. And Betsy, will you call through the list?
I will. So the first person we have is Romana Mahuddin. So I will promote her now to a panelist.
So we're going to do like full school committee does, so a cap of 3 minutes. And I'm going to try to keep time while listening. So wish me luck.
So you can go ahead, Romana. We can see you.
Hi, thank you for inviting me to attend your meeting this evening. I wanted to just briefly introduce myself. My name is Romana Mahuddin. I am a program supervisor at Lesley University. I'm also a parent of an 8th grader at the Runkle School. And I've also been an elementary educator for more than 15 years. And I was very interested in learning about educational equity in the Brookline High School. Because as I understand in education, equity focuses on providing all students with the resources and support they need to succeed, regardless of their background, abilities, or any other characteristics. And I was interested in learning about how the high school demonstrates equity through their practice and their policies. And based on my understanding of leveling, students can demonstrate support or demonstrate equity through providing opportunities for advanced learners, providing enrichment opportunities, allowing students to progress at a faster pace. That supports student engagement. Equity can also be in the context of supporting students who may need additional support. And I recognize, some of the concerns regarding leveling. And I just wanted to just briefly reflect on how we can support equity in high school leveling. For example, regularly reviewing and reassessing grouping decisions to ensure that they're fair and based on accurate assessments. Provide opportunities for students to move between levels based on demonstrated progress and abilities. Implement culturally responsive teaching practices to address potential biases. And ensure that resources and support are distributed equitably across all levels. And of course, having high-level instruction by having qualified teachers to teach subject matter. So these were some of my thoughts. So thank you for allowing me the opportunity to share them today.
Thank you. Next, we have Devin Oberly, and please forgive me if I am not pronouncing anything correctly.
Thank you. That's the correct pronunciation.
Uh-oh. Is it just me who lost? Okay. Betsy, did we lose that individual?
I see that she's still an attendees with her hand raised.
Yep, and we're trying again to promote you. There you
I
go.
think
Sorry
I'm
about that.
here. Yeah, and I don't know.
Okay.
I don't think I touched anything, but if I did,
Okay.
sorry. I'm Devin Oberly. I'm a special ed and math teacher at the high school, and this is my 3rd year in Brookline. I'm speaking in support of the equity audit. From a teacher perspective, we have great programs working towards equity. The Scholars, LEAP, STEPS, METCO, Calc Project, and ACE are examples of this at the high school. That being said, it's not enough to just have good activities and resources. As teachers, we gather pre-assessment data to determine where students are starting from. We set goals with students, and then we collect formal and informal data constantly to assess how students are doing and make adjustments. I think a similar approach is needed for our district when it comes to DEIJ. If we want to make meaningful change, we need an honest and complete diagnosis of what's happening or not, and then make a specific plan to our needs and goals. Make a plan specific to our needs and goals. I co-facilitate monthly professional development related to equity at the high school. 20 teachers spend 2 hours together each month making action plans to tackle racism within ourselves and the spaces we share with students. This class is opt-in, and though many teachers have taken this PD over the years, there's no accountability or expectation that everyone will engage in this equity work. As a white teacher in Brookline, I can opt in or out of DEIJ work, which is not the case for the folks of color in our district, since those are the people that students of color turn to for support and who get pulled into things when something happens. There is an incredibly heavy and unfair burden placed on our educators of color that needs to be known and addressed. To bring in more and retain our current educators of color, we need more white folks, myself included, to step up, and I'm hopeful that an equity audit could start this movement. Without an equity audit, we don't have any data on what our strengths and needs are with regards to equity. Without data, people can continue believing that there aren't inequity issues in a district like Brookline, and primarily white people will continue to not opt in to the efforts that are happening. We need data, and we need sustained district-wide effort towards our goals. Malcolm Cawthorn, our METCO director, has said before that how we spend our money reflects our values, and I want to work for a district that prioritizes equity as a value beyond words, but also in action. I want to encourage us to support the 2 women of color, who the district has hired to direct diversity, inclusion, and justice. It's not enough for us to simply have hired Claire and Christy. We need to listen to them and trust their expertise, knowing that in acting on their requests, our district will benefit. Thank you.
Thank you, Devin. Next, we have Dana. Is Dana in the attendees?
Dana's joining now as a panelist.
Okay.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Donna. I'm a parent of a Brookline High School student. Brookline community came together to address hate against groups such as Asians, African Americans, LGBTQ. Yet when it comes to the oldest documented hatred in human history, Jew hatred, the same community chose to turn deaf ears and blind eye. We have come a long way in supporting Asians, African Americans, LGBTQ minority group in our community. Yet Jews as a minority group has been ignored. Out of the 350 million people in the US, less than 2% are Jews. If that is not a minority, what is? Jewish students in Brookline have been severely bullied, shamed, cussed out, harassed, yet no support has been extended to the Jews. Crickets is all we hear. As Jews, over the past 2,000 years, we have endured and survived slavery, rape, persecution, pogroms, exile, genocide, expulsion, and discrimination. No single group of people were persecuted for as long, so consistently, and so universally. It has to stop, but it hasn't stopped yet. Since the heinous war crimes perpetrated by Hamas that inflicted unimaginable pain and suffering on Jews on October 7th, there has been a surge in Jew hatred once again. Jewish businesses have been vandalized, Jewish students have been harassed and assaulted, shunned and shamed for who they are, Jews. If that does not qualify as oppressed, what does? For 3 months, over 100 days, our Jewish and Israeli Jewish community have been attending every school committee, calling, crying, and urging our school committee and community leaders and the superintendent to step up, to take action in order to address Jew hatred as they have done with other groups. Our leaders and community members have abandoned us. The leaders who have been just deaf to the cries and blind to the severity of the situation. In order to address Jew hatred in our community, I'm calling you all. First, acknowledge the need to understand what is Jew hatred, recognize its existence, and then educate our teachers and our students how to identify and combat it. Well, I want to thank you for listening, and I want to thank Claire and Christy for helping organize the first meeting in the high school. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next is Danielle Lentz.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak today. My name is Danielle, and I'm a parent of 2 boys in the Driscoll School. I've addressed you before, and I'm here today with a very brief request, really, to emphasize the importance of including additional groups in the original definitions of the DEIJ efforts. It is really important to use this system for inclusion and justice across all students, even if their religion or ethnic affiliation has not been considered part of the DEIJ before October 7th. As we've learned in a previous interaction, religions were not previously considered in the same manner in the jurisdiction of the DEIJ, but addressing anti-Semitism in the school system is essential. And the relevant discussions, the teacher education that is needed, and the communication with the students must be addressed, as would the required budget, if any is needed to supplement these efforts. The same applies for Islamophobia or any other discrimination or bullying or any sort of negative hatred that is expressed in our school system. It doesn't matter if it was previously part of the discussion of the DEIJ or not. The purpose should be to really avoid any sort of this behavior in our school system. And so I hope that this will continue to be addressed and emphasized in your efforts as we look into the actions as well as the budget in 2024 and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Abby.
Hi, everyone. I'm Abby Erdman. I taught English and SWS for decades. I want to begin by thanking all of you on this committee, Val, Stephen, Natalie, and Mariah, who have all worked hard for diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice, the name of the committee. I really believe we're aligned and united in our concerns. And I want to thank Claire and Christy for jumping into this work in Brookline and acting with vision, diplomacy, and determination. Since Janae's resignation, I have heeded her words profoundly. I think we should all keep her letter on our fridges, that the system, quote, will continue to do what it is designed to do unless we fiercely disrupt it. That cannot be the work of a single office or the charge of 2 women of color. It cannot and must not be the work of teachers and staff of color. It must be the work of all of us, especially white people. If we are, as Janae framed it, quote, to see success in the areas of non-ornamental anti-racism and real meaningful social justice that she said, had not seen in schools as a child. An equity audit looks expensive. It is expensive until you consider the expense of not doing it. In Brookline as elsewhere, we see patterns. Teachers and administrators of color leaving at an alarming rate, an opportunity gap where high-level courses serve predominantly white privileged students, leading effectively to a segregated high school. All students are suffering. All staff suffer in the absence of staff and teachers of color. Our opportunity gap fuels our achievement gap, and all children suffer. Funding programs like Scholars and LEAP, which seek to support students of color, have not been the priority of the school system, and they must be. An equity audit will, again, to quote Janae, mitigate against, quote, the unhealthy urgency to show immediate results. And it will lead us to see what we need to, and in the end, cost less than doing the work piecemeal or not at all. I've listed a few problems, yet I'm aware that these are just the most obvious. What about issues that I just learned about this week? Hidden Brookline is not being taught, though mandated, for the 3rd grade. A scholars program existing in some elementary schools, but not in other. Curricula focusing primarily on works by white men, and an unwillingness and a fear of talking about enslavement in the early grades. I'm aware of how much I am not seeing, even though I am looking for it. And I'm sure you are too. An equity audit will guide us to the small and large problems so we can begin to address them, and so the system can be turned around. We must begin and end with equity, or we'll be in another 50 years still facing these same issues. We cannot fix a broken system unless we understand it and see it. We must have clarity in our district around DEIJ goals and a commitment to achieve them. This is my 51st year teaching and working in Brookline. I don't know how many of you are 51, but many of the problems that existed when I first arrived still plague us and haunt me. Yet for the first time, and here's my positive take, we have a large and united equity coalition. We now have top-down and bottom-up movers committed to justice and equity. We have the school committee, you four and others, school leaders, Dr. Gilroy, Claire and Christy. We have leadership. We have parents in care who've been meeting and brainstorming for years to bring about anti-racism education. And I don't know if you've heard, we now have Brave Adults, our newly formed high school teacher and administrator racial activist group with 18 teacher leaders. I started it in September with Malcolm across the high school, all united in our determination that this year, we must go big and bold to align Brookline with the values it says it stands for. Thank you for your work. And I know you four are very committed to this work. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Abby. Next up is Marco Bitron. And again, forgive me if I'm mispronouncing.
He's joining now as a panelist.
Hi, can you see me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Thanks so much for giving me some time to speak. My name is Marco Bitran. I'm the parent of 2 Brookline students, a junior at Brookline High School and an 8th grader at Runkle. I'm also a Baker School and Brookline High School alumni. Very, very proud of that. Had a great experience growing up in Brookline and being educated there. I'm here to speak a bit about the DEI and the Jewish community. Very short comments. The Jewish community are we're an incredibly diverse group of people. So if you look at my children, for example, their grandparents are from Ethiopia, Egypt, Portugal, and the United States. And their parents, which is my wife and I, of course, were born in Brazil and Israel. How could these children not be included in DEI initiatives given their very diverse backgrounds? Jews have been historically one of the most persecuted peoples, as you know, and this continues today. Jews should be included and should be the focus of any DEI initiatives and curriculum. For this to be accomplished, teachers need to be educated as such. Part of this education should include the history of the Jews. In addition, teachers should be educated to identify discrimination in the form of anti-Semitism or anti-Zionist speech, which is the modern-day post-Holocaust form of Jew hatred. I'd greatly appreciate it if a budget could be allocated for this purpose, given the rise in racism against Jews that we've seen globally. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Jana Schechterman.
Hello, good evening. Great to see you all again tonight. So my name is Jana Schechterman. I'm a parent of a Wrigley School 7th grader and a BHS sophomore. First of all, I wanted to thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. And I'm about to share, I'm about to share some information, and then it's going to be few speakers. We're going to be sharing the same message, consolidated message. Before we start, I wanted to thank Claire Galloway Jones and Christy Hernandez from the Office of Equity and Inclusion. Thank you for playing an active role in the listening session last Wednesday for the parents of Jewish students in BHS. As you probably heard, many parents reported that they felt heard for the first time and highly appreciated the open dialogue, your openness, your candor, and your willingness to tackle difficult conversations and challenges. Claire and Christy, we also wanted to acknowledge the work that you have been doing behind the scenes to create a safe and inclusive environment for all the students, and we look forward to continuing our collaboration with you and with the office. This past December, we conducted an anonymous survey among Jewish and Israeli BHS students to provide them with a secure outlet to express their sentiment in the building since October 7th, and to provide us the ability to gather data that would offer insights into the school environment. And that will enable us to tailor our requests from the administration and the school leadership. The survey was comprised of 2 brief questions, and we received a total of 27 responses. With your permission, I will share the responses to our first question. The first question was, what does it feels like to be Jewish and or Israeli at BHS right after October 7th? Anonymous response number 1, I feel out of place. I second guess anything I'm being told by my friends and teachers. 2, feels bad and unsupported. It feels like we don't matter. 3, it feels not great. A few of my teachers and a lot of students have made anti-Israel and anti-Semitic comments. 4, mostly it feels safe, but there have been some comments made by students that create a potentially harmful and stressful environment for Jews. There's a lot of insensitivity sometimes. 5, it's something to wear with pride. It feels like my responsibility to inform the ignorant. Anonymous response number 6. There's a very hostile environment against Jews at BHS. 7, it feels normal for the most part. There will always be that moment when I share my identity and wonder if people will give me a hateful looks. 8, it feels pretty bad. The only times it doesn't feel bad are at the Jewish Student Union meetings and at the affinity spaces. 9, typically I feel fine and a part of the community, but occasionally when I see students saying, doing, or posting anti-Semitic things and teachers not stopping it or even encouraging what they do, makes me feel alienated and uncomfortable. One instance that made me feel unaccepted was when a kid posted photos from pro-Hamas protests on a school site, and the school requested that they write a description to go with the photo. Response number 10. For me, I'd say it does feel as though there is more of a spotlight on the Jewish and Muslim communities at school. I haven't experienced anti-Semitism myself in the wake of October 7th at BHS, but I've heard stories about people who have, and that doesn't sit well with me. And the last comment, number 11, recently I've been feeling betrayed, not only by the students, but also by the teachers. How am I supposed to feel welcomed when people call me a colonizer? How am I supposed to feel welcomed when people favor only one side of the story because of Brookline's favoritism towards the oppressed, when in reality it is a war and not a one-sided situation? Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Donna Perry.
Hi, good evening. I'm going to continue where Yana left off. My name is Donna Perry. I'm a parent of 2 high school students, one who is at BHS. Thanks so much for having us this evening and allowing us to address the committee. I want to share the responses from the second question in the anonymous survey that Yana referred to. The second question that we posed to students was, what do you need most from BHS teachers and staff right now, meaning after October 7th? Here are the responses we received. Number 1, I need more acknowledgement of how the event affected Jewish students. 2, we need our affinity space back. That was all we had, and we want it back. 3, I need the teachers to teach people about what happened. 4, I need clarification to other students about what constitutes hate speech, in parentheses, from the river to the sea, Intifada revolution, end parentheses. I need you to require teachers to check in with us. I need better Holocaust and anti-Semitism education at school, and I need a condemnation of the speech from doors. 5, I need our teachers to be educated about the conflict. 6, please don't avoid the topic, but when you address it, please make sure you address it in a constructive way and acknowledge the way in which Jewish, Israeli, and Muslim Arab students are impacted by what is happening in the Middle East right now. 7, I need actual, genuine support because the teachers act like they care for a minute, but really none of them give a SHIT, and even some of the Jewish teachers. 8, I really liked the Day Against Anti-Semitism a couple of years back. For me, it was very powerful, and it made me feel like we were actually being heard. 9, I need them to make people aware of what is going on because so much ignorance is coming from a lack of education. 10, I need less opinions and I need more support. And the last comment we received from a BHS student was, I need them to talk about what's happening now and about the Holocaust because it's also relevant to what's happening now. Thank you so much for letting us share. And I also just want to take a minute to specifically thank Christy and Claire for their incredible support last Wednesday. Have a good night.
Thank you. Our last speaker is Ruvi Kita.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes,
All
we
right.
can.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Ruby Kitav. I'm the parent of a senior at BHS, and I'll continue. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today and to share in their own words the experiences and impressions of Jewish students at BHS. The work of ensuring educational excellence and ensuring that every student, regardless of race, ethnicity, nationality, religion, gender identity, sexual orientation, disability, and socioeconomic status, feels safe and welcome inside our schools is hard work. And at times, it is incredibly painful work. To hear these students explain how they feel being Jewish students in our school during this incredibly complex and tumultuous time is a gift and it is opportunity. And given this specific moment in the budget process and the planning, it is a call to action. We hope you take the brave honesty of our students and provide them with the tools, mechanisms, and protections that they need. As a group, you've heard us advocating for hate speech definitions, protocols, and procedures for many, many weeks now. We hope that together with the immense amount of parent feedback collected last Wednesday, These student narratives will provide you with additional data needed to roadmap these initiatives for the betterment of all students across all identities. Students, staff, and families need the structure and parameters that clear definitions of hate speech will provide. They need a set of clear, explicit, and shared expectations. They need to know how to report, what to report, and what happens after they report. This type of level setting and process mapping is critical to enabling our students, staff, and families to feel safer at school and to successfully navigate a landscape that has grown increasingly confusing and dangerous. We are ready and willing to support the district in this work. And also I want to thank again Christy and Claire for all the work that they've done behind the scenes and for everything that they did last Wednesday. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. That's the conclusion of our public comment segment. Be moving on to the overview of CARE, the Coalition for Anti-Racist Education. Abby, back to you.
So I think we've had a miscommunication in terms of the agenda, because I think, can we postpone CARE? The two people who are going to present, one's on an airplane and the other can't make it.
Sure,
And I could talk, I'm a member of it, but I'd rather have them do it. Is that okay?
that's fine. We
I'm
can,
so,
we
so
can
sorry.
push that off. Not a problem.
Okay, sorry about that.
Okay, no problem. So Claire, on to you then. Update on proposed equity audit and discussion of equity goals.
All righty, thank you.
I'm going to share my screen really quick. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you, Christy. All right, so for this evening, can everyone hear me? I'm getting a little wonky on my side. Just want to make sure everyone can hear me. Awesome. Okay, so for tonight's goals, what we want to be able to do is to understand and connect the PSB vision goals and the DESE vision goals to OE's preliminary roadmap for educational equity. We also want to go ahead and try to share the alignment and the proposed equity audit to PSB's strategic plan, and to unpack and connect the curriculum reviews to educational equity work in the district thus far. Next slide. So this is our Public School of Brookline vision and goals. Brookline provides every student with an extraordinary education through enriching learning experiences and a supportive community so they may develop to their fullest potential. Those are the goals. That is the vision that we are rooted in. Our goals are joy in learning, excellence in teaching, culture of collaboration, celebration of difference, commitment to equity, and ethic of wellness. Next slide. Here we have our DESE vision, so our Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. DESE's vision, the goal of this work is to support students to thrive by creating affirming environments where students feel seen, engage in deeper learning, and are held to high expectations with targeted support. To realize this vision, educators must have the mindset, knowledge, and capacity to serve all students well, particularly students from historically underserved groups and communities. Pulling out these bullets, we have all students are known and valued, learning experiences are relevant, real world and interactive, and individualized supports enable students to excel at grade level or beyond. There's a hyperlink here. Oh, if you can just go back quickly. There's a hyperlink here. You don't have to click on it now, but I would encourage that the committee take some time just to click on it, and you'll be able to get a really nice visual of what that looks like from the DESE perspective. Next slide. And so what we try to do here in OEE is to look at some takeaways in alignment. And there were three buckets that we were really looking at: high expectations, embracing and valuing differences, targeted and supportive community. So under our high expectations, students learn through curriculum and instruction that aligns with Massachusetts curriculum frameworks at or above grade level, connects to their identities, and utilizes evidence-based practices. Combined with students and families have a sense of belonging. They are students that have a sense of belonging, known, respected, and valued for who they are and what they engage in deeper learning, and are bring to their school community, including their unique identities, strengths, interests, needs, languages, exceptionalities, and backgrounds. Also, coupled with students receive necessary evidence-based supports and accommodations to learn knowledge and skills at grade level or beyond. Students with disabilities receive carefully designed instruction that accelerates their growth towards learning goals. Underneath, we have culturally competent and responsive community. This is a community that is rooted in equity as the foundation of excellence and achievement. I think several times when I've had an opportunity to speak with the community, we talk about equity being the foundation of all the work that we do. Next slide. So as we start to think about what this means through the PSB vision and goals and looking at DESE's vision and goals, it really gives us an idea of what a portrait of a culturally competent and responsive district is. To consistently provide each student access to the learning opportunities they need to excel, schools need strong culturally responsive leaders. Culturally responsive leaders focus on academic success, cultural competence, and developing students and educators' abilities to think critically about the world around them. They create learning experiences intentionally built to meet the needs of every child. Being culturally responsive is the work at the heart of making school systems more equitable. I think what we really want the message to be, again, the equity is our foundation. We have high expectations, and that we really need to be culturally responsive leaders, have to lead our buildings as they are the educational leaders of each school, and making sure that that is the experience that all students receive. Here we have a portrait of a culturally competent and responsive district. This is just another visual that kind of helps you see what it looks like. You have equity and access, mission, vision, and core values, instruction, adult learning and development, operations and resources, personal learning and development, strategic change, and continuous improvement. These are all the things that are connected to be a culturally competent and responsive school district. We always want to remember that we want to be a district, we want to make sure that we are not just a district of schools, but that we are a full comprehensive school district.
Claire, can I ask you just to pause there? Because
Sure.
I'm not sure I'm understanding culturally competent in this or I want to make sure that I'm understanding it correctly in this context. Are we talking about a culture of equity, or are we talking about actually being competent in terms of the cultures and backgrounds that students bring?
I think it's a combination of both. So as we think about being culturally competent and responsive, we know that there's the cultural competency continuum, and that oftentimes when we refer to that, we're talking about your own personal journey and your understanding. I think as we look at being a culturally competent and responsive school district, you're taking part of that journey, but you're implementing it into all aspects of the district. So when you talk about equity and access, so that's a big part of that. What is the district's mission and vision and core values? Does it align with being culturally competent and responsive? Thinking about our adult learning and development, as we think about professional development for our practitioners across the district, are we making sure that when we are making choices for our practitioners and that we're supporting them so that they are taking on professional development that allows them to become more culturally competent and responsive so they can be the best practitioners possible? Looking at our operations and our resources, where are we spending our money? What are the structures and barriers that are in place that are actually getting in the way of students having equity and accessible access to academic achievement? Personal learning and development, same thing as we're thinking about what is it personally that you need to do for yourself to make sure that you are a culturally competent practitioner and district leader? And then strategic change and continuous improvement, that it's cyclical, that we're going to be constantly revisiting. I always say that when you look at the cultural competent continuum, you're never just proficient. I think at different times that you could be anywhere along the continuum, that this is a constant journey. And so we have to think about strategically what that change looks like with continuous improvement. Did that help a little bit?
Yes, thank you.
You're very welcome. And so then we move on to culturally responsive practice. Culturally responsive practice, the use of, and this term is specific to deliberate and requires that education leaders understand and simultaneously attend to a strong foundation of cultural understanding, the academic success of all students, cultivating and deepening the cultural competence of themselves and the adults that they lead, and the cultivation of socio-political consciousness. And so as you think about what the goals for OEE are, this is our preliminary plan. We will be coming forth in the next couple of months with a more comprehensive plan, but this is where we are thus far. Listening and building trust. This is incredibly important for us in the office. Increase PSB's data collection measures for educators, staff, and families. We are looking at, we are trying to amend our current data collection measures to be culturally relevant and equitable. All of this is to provide accurate, actionable data on the current state of our school system and belongingness from every angle. Acknowledge and name areas of strength and improvement. Establish plan for a portrait of a culturally confident, responsive school district and educator, and continue to build upon a plan for capacity building, establishing consistent communication. So that's our preliminary plan at this point.
All right, so now diving into what you get from an equity audit. The goal of an equity audit is to identify institutional practices that produce discriminatory trends in data that affect students. Schools and districts conduct audits to analyze data in 3 key areas, those key areas being programmatic equity, teaching quality equity, and achievement equity. And we are going to flesh out each one a little deeper. So programmatic equity, it encompasses the programs that exist in schools and also the policies and institutional practices that inform those programs. So those programs are STEM all the way from enrollment of students in special education, AP, honors, standard classes, to the scheduling and staffing that goes into those programs. And that also brings in these questions of how are these factors impacting the preparedness of students and the experience students and educators / staff are having across PSB. Under programmatic equity is also the disciplinary system that we have at each of our schools, the procedures and protocols that go into that. And with a focus on that question of who is being disciplined and how are they being disciplined? And if there's uniformity across that in all of our schools, or if it's being done differently at each individual school. The next key area is teaching quality equity. Teaching quality equity has to do with our educator knowledge of best instructional practices, as well as this would also yield data on rates of educator turnover across schools and would give us insight into the question, do certain schools have higher turnover rates than others, and why is that? Teaching quality equity also covers rates of educator certification and experience / expertise across all programs and schools. It provides insight into other questions such as, are the most experienced teachers teaching students with the greatest needs? Are teachers in high need areas such as special education, English language education, are they certified? Are most new teachers teaching in schools with the greatest needs, et cetera? And then the last key area.
Sorry, can I stop you for a second? Christy, Stephen has his hand up.
Yes, sorry, I didn't see that.
Stephen?
Just a clarification. The slides that led into this, what you get from an equity audit, were about culturally responsive practice and programming. What's the link between that and the equity audit? Is the goal of the equity audit to get to culturally responsive practices and programming, or is that one component of equity? I was just confused about I missed a segue from what Claire was talking about to what you're talking about, Christina.
Totally. And Claire, please feel free to jump in. But what I think is that in order to have a culturally responsive district, we need the data and the bird's eye view that this equity audit would give, as well as the fact that it gives insight into each individual school.
So that is the outcome we're looking for, is cultural responsiveness.
Yes.
Okay.
You want to add anything, Claire, before I keep going?
Actually, one more hand too.
No.
Mariah's hand is up.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry. No, that was a good explanation. I think what we're, the idea of having the portrait of a culturally responsive district and a culturally responsive practitioner is a goal that I think is incredibly important. So when people look at PSB, that's what they know. That's what they know that their students are getting when their students are entering classrooms. The equity audit, you will need to go through and do a comprehensive review of our programmatic, our teaching and quality, and looking at our achievement data to actually help yield that.
Mariah?
Thank you. I saw in the budget that there is funding requested for an equity audit. I was curious whether you have, whether the budget that is included definitively will include all of these things, or whether the budget that you have been able to request will only be enough for a subset of this description.
So in what was submitted for the Office of Educational Equity, the equity audit is one piece of that work. So I'm not sure if you're referring to just the equity audit piece. So yes, I think the equity audit piece, give or take the consultants that we align ourselves with, we will be able to do a full comprehensive equity audit for the requested amount. There's also an additional request in regards to moving our capacity work around professional development and our practitioners. So I'm not sure if you were referring to that, Mariah, as well.
No, I'm specifically referring to
Okay,
the equity
no,
audit. Yes,
no.
thank you.
You're very welcome.
No, wait, no, or yes, the money you have there.
Yes,
will-
yes,
Okay,
exactly.
okay.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Yes, I apologize.
All right, so jumping back into that third key area, achievement equity covers an analysis of the inequities in achievement at each grade level based off of state assessments. And it also analyzes rates of retention, both at grade level, meaning how many children are asked to repeat the grade again, as well as school-wide retention and district retention. How many of our kids are we retaining? How many are leaving to go to other districts? How many are leaving one PSB school to go to another, and why? So those are all covered under that achievement equity branch. Okay, so this looks like a lot, but I'll give you a summary. This deals with how the equity audit is aligned to the strategic plan. So each of these bullets that you see here is a goal that was pulled directly from the strategic plan with the year that it corresponds to right next to it. We are looking at goal 1, teaching and learning, and goal 3, climate and culture first, because those are our goals that are most student-centered. So I won't read through them all for you, but I think what's noteworthy here is if each of these specific bullets is a goal pulled from the strategic plan, how many goals on here are met or driven at by the equity audit? I don't know of another singular effort that meets or drives that 20 plus action items from the strategic plan. So that's there so you can review as needed, as well as it's presented in this format as well, just for people that like to see it differently. Each goal of the strategic plan that is driven at by the equity audit, or that the equity audit will yield important data on, is highlighted. And these slides are also links directly to the strategic plan, so you have that there as well.
So sorry, I just want to make sure that following up on Mariah's question. So the equity audit work itself is all included in FY25's budget ask. Do you have any sense of the anticipated costs for the work projected in the out years?
So I would say that the initial ask, I believe, was for 50,000 plus, well, a combination of 60,000, which is a combination of actually hiring the consultant and professional development that goes along with having focus groups and that type of thing to include our practitioners in that work. I do believe some of the additional asks that we have asked for, specifically for our equity leads that we hope to get started actually with this year with FY24 with some of our budgeting, that we will begin to that professional development. But next year, doing a comprehensive professional development, we'll then start doing that work in parallel. So what we're going to find from the equity audit, we'll be able to continue that work. And we should be able, I don't foresee it being a problem, us being able to fund that.
I also just wanted to go back to the slide for 1 second. Stephen had brought up that question of how are the equity audit and the picture of a culturally competent and responsive district connected. And I think here what we see is that the main connection is the equity audit will provide so much data, actionable data, to get us to being a culturally competent and responsive district, a truly culturally competent and responsive district. It'll provide whole district data as well as school-specific data and direction, which will save us time and money in the end. So one question that we foresaw you may have is, there are curricular reviews that have been done. What are those reviews that have been done so far, and how are they different from an equity audit? How is what an equity audit will yield different or more extensive? So the reviews that have been done so far, the curricular reviews, are the RTI response intervention review, the middle school review, the social studies curriculum equity audit, and the world languages review, all of which are hyperlinked in the titles. One thing that I think is very important to note is when you see the grades that are encompassed by each review, the RTI would encompass grades K to 8, middle school grades 6 to 8, the social studies audit 6 to 12, and the world languages review K to 8. What's clear here is we don't have right now something that has comprehensively studied our entire district, early education, so BEEP, all the way to grade 12. So I think that's one major difference with the curricular reviews, a need that the equity audit would meet. Also included in this slide is just a quick one-liner on what each review covered. And here,
Chris, can I just ask, the RTI is not the same as the overall special ed review, right?
the child study team review and the RTI review, yes, one and the same.
As the overall special ed review?
Yes, the one that happened on the big comprehensive one that had child study teams. I know sometimes it's a little confusing because some people refer to it as the CST review, but the CST review and the RTI review, those were one and the same.
No, I'm talking about it. So there's a broader special ed review that was done 2022.
No, that's not what we were referring to.
Right, and so then I guess the second part of my question is, why would that not be included? Or is that included?
No, I think that's a misstep on our part.
Okay, thanks.
Or I think also too, what's included here is the reviews that were done that we brought in an external company to do them. So not ones that have been done in-house within PSB, but the ones that were like formal review processes that we brought in, like a consulting firm for.
Yeah, special ed was a consultant. Lisa can probably connect you with the report, but that was an outside consultant.
Right. Lisa, did you want to shed a little bit of light on that?
Isn't one in the same. The child study team, the student assistance team, the special education audit preceded the child study team review. So Claire is right. I think there was just a little bit of confusion there. Not one and the same.
Okay, so on to the next slide. Thank you. What was yielded from these reviews? So I think one thing that is extremely important to note is when we look back at the middle school review, which was centered around scheduling and staffing and how that affects the educational experience that kids are having across PSB schools, this review did not take into account the schedules for English language learners and students receiving special education services, which I think that speaks to the need for an equity audit. These are some of the main findings that we pulled from the different reports, all of which are hyperlinked here along with the page numbers. And I won't go through all of them, but I think the main ones that I really want to draw attention to are the ones in bold. So the RTI report found that schools have varying degrees of parent/guardian/student engagement and participation in the CST process, as well as the fact that cell and behavioral tiered intervention implementation does vary by school, and the allocation of counselors, BCBAs, and social adjustment counselors varies by school as well, which when we're thinking about the experience that a child may be having in one PSB school versus another, that's a significant factor in the services that they may or may not have access to. Also, another finding of the social studies curriculum audit was that the experiences of METCO students are varied, and other identifying factors provide more insight into student success. And the social studies audit, since it was funded with some METCO money, there was a special focus on METCO students, but I think the findings of this are so telling that in seeing that the experiences of METCO students are very varied, it, I think, opens the door to, or we're able to surmise that that may be happening for other groups as well. Other groups of students that come from potentially historically marginalized backgrounds. Some other findings from the reviews are from the social studies review, students in the same courses are having inequitable learning experiences. And one more, the amount of annual time on learning a student receives in a given subject can vary considerably between schools and across grade levels in the same school. So all this to say, the implications of what this means for a child's education and the need for an equity audit here, I think, are very clear. But to me, the most pertinent information here is this is data pulled from the OE educator and staff feedback form that was pulled today. This feedback form elicited 152 responses from educators and staff across all PSB schools. And respondents rated the sense of belonging for students of historically marginalized backgrounds at their schools. 76.4% of respondents rated that as some to no sense of belonging. And I think Abby said something that I loved in public comment. She said, what is the expense of not doing this? These kids are in front of us now, and the data that is being generated from our own educators, from our own staff members, speaks volumes about the need for this audit and how valuable it will be for developing a true picture of a culturally competent and responsive district.
Thank you, Christy.
Okay, let me stop sharing.
Stephen?
Thanks for that. Thanks for that presentation. That was helpful. I have a bunch of questions. I'm just going to ask three. So I'm trying to ask the small ones. So in the budget book, the FY25 plan highlights professional development, curriculum reviews, and coaching and so on. And that's not what was described for this coming year. Is that because what you were describing for this coming year was you were just describing activities relating to the strategic work, or was there or did I miss something?
So you for FY25.
Yeah, so in the budget book, there was that short description of activities coming up for the Office of Educational Equity, and it included things like professional development, curriculum reviews, and coaching. But in the list of activities that I just saw, the goals for this year were very different. I just didn't understand the mismatch. I didn't know whether the set of activities that were described in this report had only to do with activities around the audit, or whether there was a different set of activities describing this year's work, and how I should think of both of those sets of activities.
But I
So
would
that
say
was just
that
a
it's
point of clarification.
right. I think it's a combination of both. So when you look at our preliminary plan, when we talk about to continue to build upon a plan for capacity building, that is something that is ongoing. So all of this work is going to be done in parallel. So in regards to the equity leads, which we're hoping to be able to fund, we want to start that work this year. So part of that, some of the activities that we're doing now is to provide these equity leads with professional development now to get started with the work. Then there's the actual ask for next year as well in regards to the stipend of work that they'll be doing.
So that list of activities that was in the budget book, that's still accurate. There still is a plan for this coming year to do, there is still the anticipated,
Yes,
if fully funded, to do professional development work and coaching and curriculum reviews.
yes.
Even though that wasn't listed in the presentation just now, that's still part of the
Yes,
plan. Okay,
absolutely.
that's clarification question number one. Two, there was a description in the budget book of the decentralization plan of having leads at all the schools. Could you say a little bit about that and what your thinking is
Sure.
around who they are and what they'll do?
So I think, you know, as we try to really build capacity, you can't do this work with the office of two. You really need to have people with boots on the ground in the district, out at the schools. So our plan is to have equity leads at each school. We would have 2 at each K-8 school, 1 focusing on elementary, 1 focusing on middle school, and we'd have 4 at the high school. Really, that is to build capacity. So you're having people who are providing professional development after school. So for instance, the work that we're planning to do this year is to ensure that our equity leads get trained on culturally responsive teaching in the brain by Zaretta Hammond. This is like, you know, training the trainer. So they get trained in that
Right.
work. And then in the fall, they start to do that work at school base, at school-based level. So that's how we continue to build that capacity. We are looking at having all of our equity leads trained in ideas. We're hoping to have Christy trained in ideas. That way they can come back. And then next year, they start doing that work themselves with folks in their schools.
Are these teachers or are these administrators?
These are
or-
typically teachers who are already committed to the equity work. So we have a tremendous
Okay.
amount of people throughout the district who've already been seed trained, people who really want to continue to build their own capacity on the cultural competency journey. And these are the people who would typically want to do the equity leads. We have an amazing group at the high school who wanted to share today, the Brave group. These are people who are already doing equity work. These would be the people we would be tapping for that.
Okay, thanks. That really clears it up for me. So this is part of a larger TOT model for professional development,
Yes.
essentially, as your capacity plan, your capacity building plan foundation.
Yes.
This is how you're thinking of moving that forward.
And as we think about really being a culturally responsive district and having culturally responsive practitioners, when we're onboarding people, there's an expectation going forward then, hey, that this is the professional development that we want everyone who's becoming a practitioner in the public schools of Brookline. This is the PD that they take.
Cool. Okay. I like that because I like that that's like you have a vision for a structural change to how
Yes.
we would deliver our equity work, because I think our current one is just a recipe for burnout, as I said before. Okay,
Yes.
so my big question to you is about the substance of the audit itself. So in the core slide you had those 3 buckets of the audit, 2 of those buckets, the programmatic and the achievement buckets, looked to me like the elements of that you listed it seemed to me that those elements were already widely available. When you itemized what those data sets were, you talked about reviews, but I think it's much more than reviews. I think there's also been a lot of presentations. There's just a lot of data sets that are sitting around that I think, to me, like a series of conversations would unearth that, that I don't have I'm not looking at it now, so I can't come up with an example so easily, but it seemed to me like the teaching quality bucket, that seemed like it had research questions in it that would genuinely yield new analysis. Like the 2 buckets on either side of teaching quality, it seemed like we already know discipline has large disproportionality. We have answers to a lot of those questions that are, if they're not in presentations, if they're not in reviews, they're in presentations that were given to the school committee. So the scope of what was presented for the audit, I found myself questioning because it seemed to me like a lot of it was already at the ready.
I
So
do
that was my
believe some of
reaction
it
to
is at the ready. I just think it hasn't been comprehensive. I think when you look at what was presented, most of it has been through middle school. But we really want to make sure we're doing it like from B through grade 12.
So, but even at a more comprehensive level, I guess it didn't seem to me that the scope, I'm just being frank, it didn't seem to me that the scope as presented merited an audit. It seemed to me that there were new research questions that that would yield analysis that could affect the activities that your office would program, but only in one of the three categories. In the other categories, it seemed to me like we knew the answers at a pretty high level already, or those could be programmed along, like maybe we could do one piece now to get answers, but we could continue programming while we gathered a new level of depth alongside existing programming. In other words, it didn't seem like it needed to be a foundational piece for our programming to commence. It seemed like we already had a pretty high level of knowledge. That I guess I'll stop there. That was my reaction.
No,
to
I hear
that
what you're
piece.
saying. I hear what you're saying.
Thanks.
I think I disagree somewhat. I think that there's still some deeper work that we need to do and pull that an equity audit would yield. But it's not that we haven't had, I mean, we've had a lot of work has happened. I mean, I've been here since July and I'm finding all kinds of things that have actually been done. So I understand that perspective.
Okay, thank you.
You're
Andy
welcome.
and then Natalia.
Could I just jump in really quickly and just share one comment to Stephen's question?
Sure.
I think also too, one thing is I hear you, and I also think with that data, just from that OEE feedback report, that 76.4% of respondents are perceiving our students of historically marginalized backgrounds, their sense of belonging as some to know. I think that is like a damning statistic. And I just think if that is the sense of students as belongings, those students are in our programs now. That's what's primarily making up their experience at school, their participation in programs, whether that be formal ones like special education, standard classes, AP, et cetera, or programs like a disciplinary system, everything that's making up their experience and their participation in their own education. If that's the perception by educators that are currently in the system of their students' sense of belonging, I think it really speaks to the need to deeply examine the element of programmatic equity and what are our kids actually experiencing in each school, because I actually think there is significant difference in how schools are doing disciplinary protocol and procedures, et cetera, et cetera.
So Christina, we do have another can I just, 1 second, Stephen, we
Just to say really briefly, Val, that respectfully, I think we've only had an OE for a couple of years. And to me, that statistic suggests to me the need for OE activities, like, and not necessarily a rationale for an OEE audit, because I think there's already a lot of knowledge that we could use to program the activities. That's my only point. I'm a strong supporter of OEE activities, and I want there to be more than sufficient funding to carry them out. And I would never argue against that. I'm just questioning where it is exactly that we need knowledge to move forward. I'm sorry, Val, go ahead.
No, I was just saying that we have another really important topic tonight, but just on what Christina said, it generated another question for me. I understood that slide to be staff's perception of their own sense of belonging and not them opining on how they felt students. Was I incorrect?
So that slide, we asked educators and staff members about their perception of students' sense of belonging in their building. And that's what was covered in that slide.
Okay, but we asked them that directly, right, in Panorama?
So, well,
correct.
Ask students that directly.
That's correct. And yeah, there are some differences in that data, which,
yeah.
But yes, that's correct.
That's why I was curious. Okay. So sorry, Andy and then Natalia.
Can I just throw in one caveat? Not all students take the Panorama student survey. So I think it's important to have both data sets there.
I'm going to take my question offline because I want to leave time for the policy.
Thanks. Natalia?
Yes, and I'll try and be brief also. My first question is more semantics, maybe, but I do want to make sure that I make this point is, culturally responsive to me sounds very much around, culture, ethnicity, language, religion, versus structurally competent. And, you know, and kind of the work that I do in health, like there's been a push from culturally competent physicians and nurse practitioners to structurally competent, who really understand how structures and systems, that moving away from individual bias. So I just want to make sure that it is a structural lens that you're applying. And then the follow-up question, I see you're nodding, so
Yes.
great. And then the follow-up question is, would the equity audit, if you can conceptualize it across like levels, like what can be done at the micro level in the classroom, what can be done curriculum wise, like I feel like that would be a very helpful move forward, because I sort of agree with Stephen. I can predict what your data will show. Your data will show tremendous inequities across everything. And then we keep on describing the problem. And then, you know, and then when we go to the solutions, we have a few focus groups and we don't actually delve into it. I feel like that second part, where we should be putting the attention, we actually gloss over really quickly. And we sort of hypothesize and just guess. And that is really where and I think that's what Stephen was sort of saying, like, can the emphasis be less on the data collection and really on the different levels, the sort of the deep dives? But I do think that we do need some data. There are some data gaps. Like I heard today, you know, we probably don't have data by religion. You know, that's something that I heard people want to know, are there inequities? We may want to, you know, think about what we're, you know, we may have a lot of data on historically marginalized, you know, students by race, ethnicity. I would say we might have a lot of data, but we might not across other categories. So we might need some data gaps, but I just urge you to really invest in finding someone who won't just give you the data that someone could pull, you know, from our existing data sets, and really think through really thoughtfully around the different levels and what we're talking about. Where are we talking about policy? Where are we talking individual? Where are we talking about between schools versus, you know, so anyways, that's just to urge you to take it one step a little further than what I heard, which was really a data collection exercise with recommendations, but with that step not being articulated, how you would get there. But thank you for all the work.
No, thank you. And I think if you make a really good point. I think what's going to be really telling is, how do we then really dig into the results and recommendations? There have been recommendations that have been brought forth before, and how do we really connect those recommendations and suggestions to the structures that are already in place and the barriers that are in place? I think there's a different level of a transparent conversation that we need to have, because in some respects, I agree with Stephen in regards to certain things. Like me coming in, I looked at some data, I'm like, okay, I can surmise that these are some of the things that are happening, but what is the real conversation that we're having around some of the structures that we need to the changes that we need to make in our structures, in our operations, to make sure that these that we actually see the change that we want to see. And I'm not sure that I believe that a deeper, comprehensive equity audit can provide that. But I also think there's some other work that we need to do. So when I think, say, a culturally confident and responsive school district, it's a mind shift that we need to have as the leaders in the district, that when we get these recommendations, that we're actually going to dig deep at root cause and then make the changes that need to be made at the structural level. Systemic.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Christy. We have not a lot of time for a really important policy. Can folks stay a few minutes if we go later, folks in the committee? Okay. Mariah, do you want to present the life of the school policy, the current draft? Big
Sure.
thanks to Mariah and David for working on this. And
gonna
for other
pull-
folks like Linda and Faith for giving some suggestions, feedback.
I'm gonna pull up the draft that I believe you all got late this afternoon. And this draft, basically the one we looked at last time, I accepted all the changes and then responded to some comments from Linda and made a couple other changes myself that when I accepted all the changes, I realized some things made more sense a little bit different or had typos or something like that. So let me pull that up. So can you see the document? Yes, okay. So just to go quickly through a couple of changes in the first paragraph, there was some comments about othering out-of-district students by calling them out, saying all students, including out-of-district students, when by definition, they're already all students. So I removed that. And then,
Mariah,
yeah.
I do think we need to say all students in the LEA of Brookline, which makes it very clear that we are including out-of-district students without saying all students, including out-of-district students.
Wait 1 second. The TV next to me just like turned on blast. Give me
Sorry.
1 second.
And I just a comment for the group in general. I think this is the third meeting I've been to talk about this subject. We seem to always be the last thing on the agenda, and we've been rushed every single time. And while I'm not saying that the other topics are not extremely important, I do think this is also important. And it feels like this has been not given as much time for good dialogue as I would have hoped it had been. So Mariah, I was just saying that while I was one of the people who said that that sort of others them, I do think we need to say all students in the LEA of Brookline to make it absolutely clear that we are including out-of-district students. We only need to say it once, but if we say it at the very beginning, that sort of takes care of that.
Okay. I was a little worried LEA might not be immediately obvious to lots of readers, but we'll put it in there and that's okay. It's still a legal term, so. LEA is Local Education Authority, right? Am I missing anything? That's right.
I think that's right.
Lisa's, oh wait, Lisa, are you shaking or nodding? Or whichever one? Okay, you're nodding. It's the good thing. Okay. And then there was a question about homeschool, what that meant. And I don't know if this is the right term, but I tried to be more specific because I tried to say it like your designated school, but I'm imagining that there's actually a label in Aspen that names the school that you are most closely affiliated with, or maybe I should say PSB affiliated school. And this is the question of like, say you went to Lawrence and then you moved to Ruff and Ridley. Lawrence might technically be your home school and that it's your like the school that would be your catchment area, but it's not necessarily where you're going to school. Or if you were and again, one situation I could think of is imagine you ended up out of district, but before that you were at Ruff and Ridley, and before that you were at Lawrence. I would imagine you would have one school with which you had the most affinity or affiliation, so you would pick that school, whether you was Lawrence or Ruff and Ridley. Again, just to use this example, and that would be your designated school. I don't know how to describe this exactly right, but I was trying to get at the issue that was identified of students perhaps having more than one potential quote unquote homeschool.
So I'm also thinking, Mariah, of someone who say is at the TLC, but lives in, I don't know, Baker or Lawrence district and maybe wants to go to something at Lawrence or Baker. So so would FRR be considered? I just want to make sure that they would be able to.
Maybe if we use the word
activities.
affiliated, it sort of is vague enough, but allows some flexibility. You know, where designated seems specific, but affiliated seems less specific. Because I agree, like you want to be able to go to Lawrence, but you might also want to go to things at the TLC. Like, let's say you went out of district after you were at Lawrence and then at the TLC, and then you went out of district. You might want to do things at either one of those two schools. And are we opposed to that, or do we want to limit it? I don't know.
I guess I'm just wondering about the complexity of that. And we have students who, I'm just throwing this out there. For example, if you're a student who doesn't have an IEP and you're at Lawrence and then you move to Ruff and Ridley, are we going to let you keep going back to Lawrence for extended day and enrichment activities? Like, I'm just thinking about the logistical complexity of some of this and the community orientation of it, and thinking, are we trying to, like, are we letting people keep every single affiliation independent of of their IEP status, but just in general, as we think about including people in the life of the school, is that what we're trying to do? I'm not sure we need to have everybody be able to go to every single activity at every school they've attended.
Right.
So, Lisa, how would you define homeschool or whatever that isn't exactly homeschool?
Well, when I think about tracking my students that are in out of district schools, I do track what is the home school for purposes of communication, which is the neighborhood school where that student started their education, their neighborhood school. So
Where is that tracked? Because it's not on the parent side of Aspen, right?
that's
So
right. But it's my internal tracking system because I want to make sure that when I'm communicating those names to the building principals for purposes of homeschool communication, that that a family that might be attending Milestones, but their homeschool was Lincoln, that they're getting all of Lincoln's communications. That's the way we've been doing it. I can certainly make any adjustment needed, but that's how I've been defining it, your neighborhood school, not how you moved through the journey, through the educational journey.
Right, but there are
Open
students,
to thinking about it differently, but that is
Yeah.
how I've done it.
there are students who have never attended their homeschool. There are
Yep,
students,
sure.
and so I think that's where it becomes complicated, is that there are students for whom their homeschool is not, doesn't mean anything to them.
Right, it's a different agenda, right? Because it may be the homeschool is important for a family because of a sibling. But for the purposes, this has sort of a different goal in mind. So as I said, I'm open to I like the word affiliated. I think Linda definitely is on the right track there. And in
Can
some
we-
cases, it's going to require a little bit of individualization.
Lisa, if a parent said to you or a caregiver said to you, yeah, my quote unquote homeschool is Lincoln, but my kid went to Rough and Ridley before whatever, can you just switch it? I'd rather get communications from Rough and Ridley. Can you override it?
I can.
Like, could we just put like quote unquote like home like that?
Yeah, we can adjust the communication, no problem. Because
Okay.
that is being controlled through OSS.
Could we just do like home or affiliated, something like this?
Home or affiliated school, yeah.
Okay, and then I think we need to come back to this, but maybe not at this moment. We can tighten up that wording, but for now, hopefully that gets at some of the questions we're talking about. And then the next thing was I put in, this was unilateral, but I put in the idea that it's not just what's happening at your school, but district-wide activities as well, which I think was implicit in some of this, but we should call it out. Everything else here is what you saw. There was some wording here to just clarify. Some legal references, which was referenced above, but is again referenced here. And then this one bit about accommodations for programs that are less than a year, I just moved it up to go directly here in the conversation about accommodations. There's a whole paragraph here about like what it means for competitive programs, and I thought this sentence should just stay above with the rest of it.
I just had a question about that, Mariah, because
yeah.
it goes right after that level of accommodation is going to be determined by the IEP team. I don't see how the IEP team is going to be able to consider feasibility of staffing. That isn't kind of how IEP teams work. So Lisa, I didn't know if you had any thoughts on how that, because those two don't go together to me anyway.
Mhm.
Well, the nice thing is putting them next to each other makes it clear that they don't go together. Maybe that was a little more hidden before.
Could I ask a related question
Yes,
about that?
yes.
Could I ask a related question about that same sentence, which is writing it that way meant is the intention that this come up as part of the formal IEP meeting, exactly as if it were an accommodation for, you know, for one of the academic sort of activities during the school day, or is it that it could be done sort of by the members of the IEP team, but not necessarily in the formal IEP meeting?
You could call an IEP meeting for any purpose. So if you had an activity that you wanted your child to be involved in and you needed accommodations, you as the parent could call an IEP, ask for an IEP team meeting, and it would be done. So
Okay. And the district.
I'm
would be
imagining
fine
it
to
wouldn't
schedule it
necessarily be in the
exactly
annual
as if it
meeting,
were.
but that it would be an ad hoc thing.
But can I also say though, and this is, I think something Lisa and I talked about, but maybe I'm misremembering that, Lisa, that the idea should really be that it shouldn't come up ad hoc all the time. This should be
That's
something
true.
that should come up at the annual meeting and say, does your child, is your child interested in, does your child attend extended day? Are they planning to next year? The idea that we do things ad hoc contributes to the challenges in staffing and funding things appropriately.
Good point, Mariah.
And it doesn't mean that at that meeting, we're not going to have the solutions of staffing. But I do think if, for example, I'm making this up, it's May, it's our annual IEP meeting. And I say, my kid has talked a lot about wanting to do extended day, or not extended day, enrichment. And so then we start thinking about what that could look like and the challenges of staffing at that point. And maybe the IEP team at that point knows, I'm making this up, but they've got 3 kids who are interested in ceramics. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there. It's sort of, it allows a fuller picture of the needs for staffing to be identified with time.
Yeah.
So
Lisa, is there a way to?
I think both are true.
Lisa, is there a way to add that to the procedures for ETFs?
I think that the new IEP process, it used to be, or it currently is, but this is going to change, that PLEP A is focused more on academic programming, and then PLEP B was focused more on all other aspects. I think the fact that we're collapsing PLEP A and PLEP B in the new IEP form, and that that the process is focusing more on student voice, student interest, student vision. I think the phrasing here works, and it's going to come up in terms of interest in music or flag football, or and the team, just as they would with any other issue, have to consider the accommodation for the students' participation. So I think this works.
Yeah, and I think it will work both ways, that hopefully we'll get most of them in the annual IEP meeting, although annual IEP meetings happen at all different times of the year. So in terms of planning, it's going to take us a couple of years before that really, really helps us.
Right.
But then there will be, oh my God, my kid just told me she's interested in volleyball and I had no idea. How do we do that? Let's get together a team meeting and figure it out. And team meetings can be done virtually, or you can just talk about it over email if everybody agrees. So it doesn't have to be a super onerous task. So I think both happen, but this covers that.
I do though think this is really important, is that sometimes the accommodations mean there should be staff and there won't be staff. And I don't know how to square that circle.
I think that will come up. I mean, that if, let's say, we'll use a hypothetical, and there's a non-academic activity, and the team begins to discuss, well, what kind of accommodations does your child need, or the team wants to facilitate a discussion what the student needs to participate in that non-academic activity. The answer to that question becomes, well, there needs to be an additional adult. There needs to be, a one-on-one. That's going to come up and get written into that plan. The accommodations are wide open for discussion. So I believe it will come up at a grassroots level at every meeting, those kinds of discussions, which is why I think what's more not a team meeting driven discussion is obviously there could be an unanticipated expense for that student's participation in a non-academic or extracurricular activity that requires an unbudgeted, financial commitment. That could potentially be an outcome. But I do believe that the conversation will absolutely happen through the team meeting process, particularly in terms of how the new IEP is sequenced.
Well, and I think there just needs to be a lot of training once this policy gets close to being in effect even, because at this point, a lot of what we would hear in an IEP meeting is, well, there isn't staffing for that. So
Absolutely.
that's going to be the answer. And so the conversation about we need to work on staffing and figure it out, and there may be a delay, is a different conversation than we would have without this policy in place. So
that's right. Yep. And there will be training of staff. There has to be.
I figured.
Okay, this one looks minor, but is kind of important. So I changed the EG to IE, which for the grammar nerds among us means this is extensively this is the list of service providers who meet this criteria. I didn't want to put in, originally we had EG, and I think Linda added et cetera, but I think we need to be very crisp as to who this applies to. And so if we put et cetera in, that leaves room for us to say, oh, well, all these other people have it, it also applies to them, or not, right? So we just need to be clear on who we are including in this policy. That was my approach to it, was to make that choice of making it IE instead of EG. I don't know if people want to, if there's other groups that people want to add to this, but I just wanted to throw that out there and make sure people understood that impact. I think that this captures all of the primary groups, and I can't see anyone or anything. So if you have comments or whatever, you need to wait a minute, okay? Okay. How long is a minute? It's a little while. Go ask Cora for stuff.
I'm glad you highlighted it, Mariah, because it is a big change. I personally can't think of other groups, but I think when we go to public comment, that's going to be an important thing to make sure we get lots of eyeballs on that list. I think you're right that the idea of limiting it, of really being specific, because otherwise you don't know whether your group falls into this area or it falls into the other area. So I think that's good. It's just making sure there are lots of eyeballs on it during public comment.
Great. Then there was the addition of the word legal, which seemed reasonable. And then this sentence, there was a question about whether or not it included transportation for extended days. If there were students, oh, I'm sorry, I'm blurring things, but for students who transition onto IEPs during the school year, including transportation, but this paragraph is about extended day, not about specific activities. So I think this actually doesn't belong here.
So
Linda, does that make sense?
Out of district students wouldn't be eligible for extended day at their home school.
Oh, okay, then it does make sense. I couldn't remember why we added it in. Right.
Yeah, it was for,
Thank you.
Right, it was for if they finish school and to get to the whatever 2 hours or
Right.
whatever it was of extended day.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you for clarifying why I couldn't remember. It made sense earlier, then it didn't make sense at 8 o'clock at night. And I wrote this in as if determined by the IEP team, mirroring some of the earlier language we had, because I think that probably depends on the case. Okay.
I think that will be an important sentence because many of our out-of-district schools do not mirror the public schools of Brookline's schedule. And so this actually comes up more than we think in terms of navigating an interest in an after-school activity that would require the student to leave their out-of-district school 90 minutes early, therefore impacting on services and progress towards goals. So the fact that the IEP team would convene to discuss the accommodations and discuss the logistical challenges, if any, I think this is helpful language.
Well, I want to clarify though, this paragraph is about extended days, not about, for example, enrichment. So if we need to move this reference to somewhere which is more broadly about all of these third parties and not just extended days, then perhaps we should move it.
Maybe we should.
Okay, let me put a comment in to
make sure it encompasses
Thank you.
everything.
move somewhere
make sure
so that it applies to all.
Yeah.
Third-party providers, okay. And then the last question from Linda, and then there's questions from the extended day directors below, but she asked about what happens if, for example, there's a third-party provider who can't do something, but there's another service that can, who has to pay for the difference if there's a cost. Again, this is a sentence for discussions based. The comparable program, the district will pay for any cost difference, and if determined necessary by the IEP team, provide transportation. Again, that language was mirroring, and this was just for the case of one of the third-party providers cannot do this. I don't know that we want to say that the district will pay for any cost difference, but I put it in there because I think it's a point to discuss.
Yep.
I guess my question on this one is if it might encourage people, there might be a perverse incentive here to sign up for something like an enrichment program that you know can't meet what your student needs, and then say, well, now the district has to pay for some other enrichment program.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm throwing that out there. I don't know that it's a perverse incentive that will actually happen in practice, but I could, I'm playing the devil's advocate and putting that out there.
So how would that work for someone to claim it that way?
Claim what that way?
For someone to use it? For someone to take a perverse incentive?
So say I want to do Lawrence enrichment for ceramics. Again, my example from earlier, but my student needs additional support to participate in ceramics. Well, maybe there's a different ceramics program that I would have signed up for anyway that I know could support my student, but it costs 3 times as much. So I just sign up for the Lawrence enrichment one, say that they can't support my student, and then have the district pay the difference. Say, now you need to pay for my student to go to this other external enrichment program because Lawrence enrichment can't meet my needs.
And particularly external programs specifically designed for students with severe special needs might be incredibly expensive.
Right.
So.
Exactly. It's an apples and oranges situation where you might have a volunteer run program in the district.
I certainly have encountered similar scenarios in the 18 months that I've been here. And of course, it's a no good deed goes unpunished, because the intention of the policy is to encourage all of our students and families to become involved in the life of their home/affiliated school. And all of a sudden you're negotiating, a fiscal settlement that's pretty far afield. So I appreciate you raising it as a point of discussion.
And I think part of it too, just on that, is that it talks about the student will provide the accommodations in the non-compliant program or a comparable one. And I guess the question is, what's the comparable one? And how do we define what comparable means?
Well, playing
Should we
devil's
say a
advocate.
program of a similar cost? Like, I don't know, I'm throwing that out there. Sorry.
If the goal of the policy is to include the student in the life of the school, a comparable program wouldn't be a life of the school. It would be an activity that is comparable, but it doesn't have to do with being in the life of the school.
Good point.
So in terms of this policy in particular, you could argue that the comparable program doesn't really belong in here, that so then what do you do if there's I don't know. But it isn't life of the school if it isn't the program that's in the school.
Exactly.
So we'll say, how about, or in a comparable program elsewhere within the school or district.
Within the school or district.
And then put in the "and if determined necessary." Because I agree, exactly. I mean, the point is to be able to make sure people can participate in their activity, is we say the life of the school.
In public schools of Brookline.
Yes.
Right.
Okay. Any comments from other people on that bit, or can we keep going?
Keep going.
Okay. Then again, I just deleted out the including out of district students that we mentioned earlier for no othering. These were the questions that the extended day directors so helpfully provided as a collective. And I'm just going to read them really quickly, but it's my thinking that some of these questions are actually answered in the policy, and some of them might go to staff to talk about process after, not during this meeting, but after this meeting. So the first one is, who is hiring the teachers or support staff for each particular child? How will reimbursement work from the town to our programs? Who's responsible for making sure that all IEP accommodations are being met in an extended day? What is the timeline for the school to inform us of each child's needs? Generally, hiring will need to be confirmed before the child begins attending. Is the school noting that they will provide support with professional development, materials needed, classroom spaces, and other specialized tools that some students require? Will there be any training provided to our staff members for those kiddos? I love kiddos who are on IEPs. Or will this work be taken on exclusively by the person hired by PSP for this purpose? Are parents of students on IEPs going to be made aware of the changing policy? Some parents don't even indicate that their children may require accommodations on their enrollment forms, even though we ask. Will we need to provide a list of our enrolled students to the town for them to determine who is eligible? And last, thinking of this from a budgetary perspective, placing the burden on PSB to provide communication from OSS and finance additional qualified staff will inevitably come back and fall on us in the form of rent, right? What is the hidden cost of the policy? Geez, extended day directors.
Those are excellent questions.
They're great questions. They're great questions.
Steve, are you holding your head?
I'm just trying to think if I can contribute at all.
But I honestly think that Lisa, if you're willing to, I think that a lot of these questions are really important for OSS to go back to and if you're willing to go back and make sure that OSS's understanding of these as written by the policy, or as how you plan to put the policy in practice. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's interesting. I met with my directors today, and they actually were pushing me. They said, well, you seem to enjoy individual conversations, negotiations, customizing programs, but this could be a full-time job in a very short period of time, because the convening of the team, the thoughtfully considering the accommodations, then if that requires staffing, cost of transportation, managing those fiscal pressures, then making sure above all that the needs of the child are addressed for a successful experience. So yes, I definitely can reflect and respond to those. They're good questions.
I do think there's a challenge with the conversation about talking with extended day in particular. Let's just use extended day because it's the biggest one. If we can figure that out, we can figure everything else out. I truly believe that. There are a lot of parents who don't talk about the accommodations their children need because they don't want to reveal their child's disability, and they fear discrimination. And we certainly can't proactively share information without the parents wanting us. So it's really also going to be talking with the parents about, in the IEP team meetings, about how to approach this in a way that makes them comfortable and gives the support that their child needs, because we don't want the kids unsupported, but there are a lot of parents who just don't want to talk about that sort of thing outside of the school.
But I also think it's a parallel to sending your kid to school when they're sick in the morning, in that when you have a child who might have additional needs and you need to go to work and you need extended day to take them in, you don't necessarily reveal everything because you're afraid that they will say to you, I'm sorry, your child can't attend. And so this policy provides a backstop for them that allows them to have some measure of confidence, assuming there's credibility and trust behind the policy, that it would allow them to be able to be, I think, feel more comfortable revealing things with the understanding that it won't result in them being told, no, your child can't attend.
Right.
What
And
it
maybe
should
it's
result
a-
in is saying the
Right.
exact opposite of, okay, let's talk about this to make sure the right supports are in place between you and between us and the district.
I totally agree. And I think if we also just the decision to accept a child or not happens before the disability is disclosed, or, there's just there's also just going to be a lot of education in this. They cannot discriminate against your kid for this. We will support your child and we will take action against them if they don't allow your child in. But, it's hard because I'll say, oh, they didn't let her in because she has a disability. And they'll say, no, she was just too low on the list. She got it, we filled up the spots and then there wasn't room because my kid was a problem. So
yeah, but I don't think that's the way
agree.
the process actually works. I think that they lottery you in and then you fill in an intake form after that. Maybe I'm wrong, but
I don't know. I've never done
yeah.
extended day, so.
I see a couple, I'm not going to call on extended day directors in the moment. I can see a couple people here, but maybe that's something that we can just confirm is because I think also you're right. People might want the process itself maybe a couple questions come off the first form and get added to a later form if that's the case. And I don't know that all extended days do it the same either.
Yeah. Over to you, Lisa.
Well, I think I appreciate the questions raised by the extended day directors, very important, and I will absolutely reflect thoughtfully because the answers are very important for our partnership, clearly.
For that, Lisa. Natalia?
Yeah, I was just going to add, a lot of the extended programs have really long wait lists. And maybe as a parent of a child on an IEP that you felt would not be able to attend, now you find out that you can through this policy. Is there a way to address that you would, like I had put my kids on the peers, for years before they got on. I mean, there was the lottery, but then the older. So is there something that we can ask extended day leadership to consider opening a few spots up for kids? I don't know, or is that cutting the line or changing the policy?
Well, is the question the overall access to extended day or specifically supporting kids who get in? Because I feel like those are two different things.
The access. I was saying the access that, now because of the policy, more families may say, like, maybe a family would have never put their kid on a wait list because they wouldn't have had accommodations. And now that they will have accommodations, they'd be like, oh, extended day, but they've missed, signing up because of this new policy. Anyways, it's probably not a huge different, but you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think, well, just practically, I think that lotteries close in March, and I don't know that this policy will be in place by the time people would have to sign up. Does that make, what I'm saying?
And that's what I'm saying. Is there a way to reserve a few spots once, like to create a different, I don't know, to allow, or even more broadly, like, do we, anyways, okay, I haven't thought this through enough. Thanks.
Anybody else on this?
Can we just confirm next steps, Val?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, unless, I don't want to cut anyone else off, but I just want to make sure we do that bit of it.
Yeah, no. So David has a policy subcommittee meeting on the 22nd, at which time it's not posted yet, but at which time I believe he plans to bring up this latest draft at policy, and then move that to full school committee. So I think
January 22nd.
Yeah, I confirm with David, but my understanding is that the plan is for this to come up in this most final form at policy on the 22nd to then be looked at the next full school committee.
It's already docketed for the next full school committee after the next policy meeting.
So,
which is the first.
If you give
Will
me
Lisa have enough time? No, not no offense, Lisa. I'm trying to protect you, Lisa. Will Lisa have enough time to come up? I'm just worried that I mean, as long as we're not expecting to have all the answers by the 1st, but maybe by the 15th, which is I think our next meeting after, or no, maybe it's the 8th. I don't know when our meetings are. I'm just realizing I'm all confused on meeting dates.
Yeah, the first reading is docketed for February 1st, but that's only the first reading, so not all the answers need to be in place by then.
Lisa, when you do have all the answers, I guess is there, I'm going to ask one more answer, which is somewhat alluded to in the extended day directors, but I think either you and or Susan, it would be helpful to understand at least a ballpark financial, you know, obviously this is going to be fluctuating wildly depending on the students who come in and leave and everything, but some sort of estimate of the cost broken down by the major sort of categories of, I don't know, extended day support, transportation. I would imagine that those are probably the two biggest categories, and then there's a MISC past that, but
yeah.
I think you're going to have a lot of questions from PTOs as well, and we should get on the docket for the parent leader meetings once this is in place, because the PTOs are really going to have some questions about how they need to accommodate this.
I think we actually even have a parent leader meeting this Friday, which I was supposed to send out an agenda request for. So maybe
maybe this would be a good topic then. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do we have one this Friday? Oh, I don't think I have
think
it on my
so.
calendar. I'm not set this year yet.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's this Friday. Okay, so we have a little bit of a plan going forward, at least for Lisa to come back at the not too distant future with some of those answers. Okay.
So 22nd policy, Lisa, and then 1st and 15th at full school committee. So you have some.
School committee meets on the 1st and then meets again on the 8th, not on the 15th. So then we need it on the 29th. So
I believe I've been asked to present on the expansion of our extended school year services on February 8th.
So you're suggesting combining it all into one big presentation?
Perhaps.
Okay.
I serve the school committee, but that may be something you'd want to consider.
This wouldn't be a presentation so much as a school committee action.
Exactly.
Well, but I think we need to hear at some point the answers to the questions and the analysis of the cost, Andy. So even if there's an action resulting, there's still a presentation.
Call it information sharing, we can call it presentation. It really is.
Think about
Whatever you want to call it, Lisa.
I like information sharing. It sounds a little more collaborative.
Are we all set for tonight, Val?
Yeah, do we have any new business? Anybody? All right, well, thanks everybody for hanging in and have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thank you, Mariah.